Let's get started. First of all, we're starting in Onshape. This is where we're going to be doing all of our CADing, and then we're going to move the drawing over to, or the CAD file over to Fusion 360 to actually set it up for milling over there, okay? We want to keep things in Onshape because it's a great platform for sharing documents, and we've got a lot of history there already. And then we're going to use Fusion 360 just like you would a slicer for printing. So those of you who are familiar with doing 3D printing, you know, roughly you can think of Fusion 360 as kind of the slicer. It does some very different things though, and you'll see that as we get into it. It's not nearly as easy as kind of setting up the slicer and then being able to import things from then on in and having it done. So we're going to take a couple things off of our drawing. First of all, we're going to take this sidebar and we're going to take the belly pan. Now we want to do them separately. So first sidebar, and I'm going to export this as a step file, not as an STL. Okay, so that's the first difference. STLs we use for 3D printing. Step files we're going to use for importing into Fusion 360. So I'm going to export that. And then I'm going to export the belly pan as well. And a quick little export. Again, keeping it in the step file, downloading it. We should be good. Okay, that's about all the time we're going to spend in Onshape. Now we're going to move over to Fusion 360 and spend the rest of the time. And I'm just going to use the test area. Now in the test area, if you use this as well, create a folder in here for yourself. I created one for myself. And I'm just going to go into that folder then, and I'm going to upload. Now, if you don't, and right now, if you're not added, that's fine. Just do this on your own instead. You'll simply upload, and I'm going to select my files. And I'm going to choose both of these, okay? It's going to put both of them in my list for me here, and I'm going to upload. All right, belly pan's complete and the sidebar is complete. It will eventually generate little thumbnails for these as well. So we're going to go ahead and go into our sidebar first. Okay. Now, Fusion 360 is a little bit different. It takes a little bit getting used to. A couple things, the center scroll or your scroll wheel, if you click it down, if you click the scroll wheel, you can move your item around like this. If you hold shift down and the scroll wheel button down again, you can rotate your item, okay? Now, we've got holes on 3 different sides of this. We're gonna do at least a couple sides of this and set it up, okay? You also have this nifty little element up in the top right-hand corner for moving around your diagram. This is the same as Onshape, right? You can just click the various areas and it will move the view for you. All right, I'm going to close this and we can always bring it back, okay? I'm gonna close this here so we have a little bit more room. Now what we're going to do is go into this big button over here is for design. You can CAD in here, but we're not going to use it for CADing. Again, we're going to use Onshape for that. So instead, we're going to go down here to manufacture. Okay, this is the manufacture module inside Fusion 360. And we're going to get started there. Okay. The first thing we're going to do is actually treat this bar as if it's sitting upright right now, and we're going to orient it. So when we're thinking about CNCing things, we always have to think about our orientation and how we're going to set things up in our CNC machine. So we're going to treat this like a piece of tubing that we would put in our vices on our CNC machine, and we're going to CNC these holes and then these holes at the end, okay? So our setup, we're going to do a new setup. You can also go up here and do a new setup, okay? Once we have the setup up, here we go. We don't have to select a machine, all right? There's no Velox machine to set up, and it's not a big deal. We do choose milling to set up, and then our model orientation is going to be important here. How we actually orientate this for our X, Y, and Z axes. So as I mentioned, we're going to treat this as if we're putting it in the vices this way, which means our X and Y are correct. However, we don't want to find our origin in the very center of the bar. We want to find our origin someplace where we can tap alongside of it and use our edge finder to find it very, very closely, right? So what we want to be able to do is actually have that down here. So we're going to choose the box point here, and we're going to click down here, and it moved our origin point. That's kind of nice. That's all we have to do right there is just click on this and our X and Y are just fine. We can change some of our other orientation, which we will when we start rotating and doing the other sides of it for other setups, okay? So all of this on this tab is set up. Now let's go to our second one, and that's stock. Relative size is fine because what we're going to end up doing is our stock offset is 0 and 0. Okay. Now, if we were doing the belly pan out of a bigger sheet of metal, we might have stock offsets that are different here. Our tubing is 1 inch by 2 inches. It should be perfectly on that. And as long as it is perfectly 1 inch by 2 inch, our X is fine and our Y is fine. So you'll see, or Z is fine. You'll see our dimensions down here, X, Y, and Z, and aligning obviously with our arrows here. Okay. So we leave these for now, and then we just say 0 for offset, and we're right on it. Now, if we did do an offset, I'm going to do like a 1 inch offset here. Notice how it offset. So this is stock side offset. It all of a sudden gave me 1 inch around the entire piece. Again, if we were dealing with a flat piece of sheet metal like our belly pan, we might have an offset like that. In this case, we don't. So that's what it looks like when we do, and we'll play around with that more when we do the belly pan. So I'm just going to set it to 2. It's not that big of a deal right now. And go from there. And the G55 says this is what the origin is right here, okay? When we rotate this, we're gonna do a different setup, and then we'll have a different offset at that time too. So for now, we're fine with this, and we hit okay. All right, so now we've got our offset, or now we've got our setup. We've told it where our origin is, and so when we zero out our end mill, it has to be in this corner of the tube. Okay, we could set it to this corner or a different corner or edge, but we have chosen this front left corner. So when we actually put it in our Velox CNC, we want to find that edge and use the edge finder to find both the X and the Y here, X, Y, and Z.